All right, join me today, Rebecca, just by herself here on Beyond the Nest, for us to be looking into what we used our look-see trip for. And what is a look-see trip? Okay, what I'm saying is look-see, all right? So L-O-O-K-S-E-E. This is what my husband and I call it. It's a scouting trip, or it's a pre-move trip. I don't know. There's a lot of different things you could call it. And in some relocations, this is something that companies sometimes pay for. Not always. We have moved several times, about 4 or 5 times through the company, and only one other time did we get a look-see trip, as we called it. So it is a chance to go look and see where you're moving to. No rocket science there. So that's why we call it a look-see trip. We were very, very fortunate in that his company did allow for this. The challenging part was, I think we went about a week too early, and I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go along. But I wanted to chat a little bit about some of the things that I had prioritized for this look-see trip so that I could feel a little bit more comfortable. And I thought I would share it with people who, again, if you are possibly moving to Singapore, you may not get a chance to go visit Singapore ahead of time and see for yourself what you need personally to feel more comfortable about the move. Watching lots and lots of YouTube videos helped me a lot in some of the preparation, awareness, and it kind of helped me prioritize what I wanted to go see first. So this is going to be kind of an interesting video in that we're going to keep going through some things. I'm just going to put some videos up here of the actual look-see trip for the stuff that we were looking for, and kind of just as a general chat along the way. But our priority, we thought, was to find a place to live. And Singapore is full of interesting neighborhoods. And one of the things I kept finding in my research is people saying there's not really a bad place in Singapore to live. That's great, but when your relocation real estate or the realtor is asking you, where do you want to live? Because he needs you to narrow it down. It is still a full country. And if you say anywhere. So you can do this in one of two ways. And really how we were looking at it is not so much the where. And this is once we went to Singapore and we saw this wonderful neighborhoods and how easily it was to get from one place to another, we made our criteria around our housing be less about specific neighborhoods and more about transit time or ease of transit. And we knew it was going to be the apartment or condominium itself. So let's just talk about that, the term. So in Singapore, condominium, it means most likely it's basically an apartment or a flat in a high-rise type building or a taller building. It doesn't have to be high-rise. It can be also, 4 or 5 stories tall. And it has a lot of amenities. And by that, we're talking about pools. It's going to have probably a gym. It'll probably have a room that you can rent to have special occasions in, so you can have more than just 4 people, because your apartment or your flat or your condo is not going to be huge like you would have in in a typical, let's say, American home, where you also would have a yard and be able to have your celebration outside as well. So they have in the States, they call them party rooms. They don't call them that here. But, that you can put your name down. You typically don't even have to pay. You might have to pay a deposit, but for any damage that might occur. But in general, if it's available, you can have it. Tennis courts, things like that, parking. A lot of them have parking as well. So all of those things are kind of found uniquely to a condominium. So deciding on the type of property is the thing that you need to figure out. Then you go, okay, for me and my husband, in our case, we didn't have to be by certain schools. We didn't need to be on a route that's easy for me to get a child to school. We could be just about anywhere, but our big consideration for me is I wanted to be within, for my husband's sake, 7 to 10 minutes to a MRT, which is their transit lines here. An MRT station, about no more than 10 minutes away, because again, he's walking to and from work, he's in humidity, he's got to wear long pants. And knowing him, he's going to wear long sleeves because that's what he's used to wearing. It can get very warm, it could be downpouring like you wouldn't believe. So all of those things are considerations, so that's why we want to be closer to the MRT. The next thing that we wanted was, if possible, a minimum of 2 bedrooms. Now, it's just us. We could get by with 1 bedroom, but we've done that. But I have to say what was more important for us was 2 bathrooms. After the last year of living in a 1-bedroom apartment with my husband with 1 bathroom. Oh, I was told years and years ago, and I have to agree, that a happy life, married life, requires a his and a her bathroom. And that being 2 separate ones. I was told that when I was really, really young, but you do. So we really wanted 2 bedrooms or 2 baths. Wanted at least 2 bedrooms. Wouldn't mind 3 bedroom. So we had, we had flexibility. We had and then the biggest thing though is always start with your budget. And yes, housing is expensive in Singapore. And right now is probably one of the worst times for us ever to be moving here, because the rental market is flying, more so than even the United States, rental and housing market here in Singapore. It's been just as insane as what we had been seeing over. And we benefited from that insanity over in the United States when we sold our cottage. But this is probably like one of the worst times. So being as flexible as we could. Another thing is, as far as location and size. If we can get a 3-bedroom, that would be perfect. So I went through all of these things because this is what we were going to give our realtor, and we thought, wow, we have all this in hand. But the one thing we didn't have coming to Singapore was the employment pass. It hadn't been approved yet. We were still in the process, and it could have taken 2 or 3 more weeks after we went on this look-see trip. So that put to looking for an apartment, because that is one thing you will have to have, because no landlord is going to take a chance that you might not get that employment pass. And without that employment pass, you are not staying in Singapore if you're coming as an expat on an employment pass, and me on a DP, on a dependent pass. So though that was a huge blow, I knew it going. I tried to tell my husband, and what was funny is we had these people helping us, supposedly relocation or settling in services. That will be a whole video later to talk about that. But settling in services, things like that. And nobody was going, no, you will not. Nobody told my husband that we would not be able to we shouldn't even be looking at apartments at the time. And as fast as this rental market was going, definitely. So that was our big hope, but I kind of knew it wasn't going to happen, so I was more prepared. I think my husband was a little bit more disappointed than I was. But the look-see trip for us overall was a chance for us to come and see some amazing things, get excited about the move, but also get the lay of the land, learn how to use the MRT system. How comfortable am I going to be traveling on public transportation without my husband sitting next to me? Well, guess what? I found out it's as great as people talk about. A lot of those things I needed to see for myself. I needed to see what the pharmacies had. Different things like, did they have the same brands even that I have? And guess what? They don't. So my skincare is going to have to be completely revamped. But yet there's so many things that are similar to the United States when it comes to those personal items. I was worried about clothing. I was worried that there was not going to be any clothing I could fit. I am not a small girl. I am not petite. These shoulders alone take up half of Singapore. But, I found out, nope, there's going to be clothes here as well. which all of that information I was getting would help me make decisions about what we were going to pack and what was my priorities of what we were going to pack. Because one of the things that I'll talk about a little bit later in our moving is, the difference between something coming sea freight, something coming air freight, and what we were going to be carrying on our bags coming into Singapore. So it really was fantastic. It put me very much in a calmer situation, not knowing at all, going completely blind. Now, was this, I'm going to come and say, oh, no, we're not moving. It would have had to been huge at that point. Our employer had offered the position. My husband had accepted it. I mean, this was not a, let's come look beforehand. But what it did is it's more reassuring for my husband because he had been here before years and years ago, but he saw me in this environment. He saw me moving around in it independently and feeling pretty darn comfortable with everything. So with all of that being said, the look-see trip ended up being fascinating. We did, I got to see a lot of places, start getting my bearings. I went to an amazing stationery shop. We talked with a gentleman on fountain pens for hours. It was really fascinating. And then we also, I got to see where he was going to work. He even, he got to meet a couple people that he was working with, which was great. And we did get to see what neighborhoods kind of consisted of so that I could get an idea. Our biggest decision too was that there's no way we're getting a car. There's a whole reason not to, with just the cost of it. Insane. Probably have a little discussion once I learn more about that whole thing, but we don't need a car. The two of us do not need a car to get around where we need to go. We can easily call, they have Uber, they have Grab, they have all of these other different, kind of calling cars. There's also their taxis. They have great taxis. Their MRT system, which is equivalent of their subway system, is amazing and incredibly well connected. And their buses, oh my gosh, so clean, so amazing. So all of those things, so easy to get around and find the things that I need for myself and to be able to be very independent and not feel like I was locked at home. Now, for me, sometimes being locked at home is exactly what I want. It's just me. But so the look-see trip was fantastic. I'm very glad that we went. We didn't come away with a lot of things accomplished because it all stems around that employment pass. And here's the kicker. We got home on a Sunday morning. It's 6 something in the morning. We went to sleep. And the next day, when Simon had got up overnight, because that was already Monday morning, so we went to sleep at Sunday night in New York, which was Monday in Singapore. He checks his account, or he checks his email, and guess what? The employment pass had come through during that time. So if we had done this 2 weeks later or even a week later, it could have been a different outcome. But at the same time, no worries, it's going to work. And but at least I have a better idea of what I'm in for and what I can do. And I'm excited about it. And it's going to help me also with the decisions of what we are bringing and what we're not, and what priority those things have. So I'm excited about that. But here are some wonderful views. As I said, I've kind of been chit-chatting along the way as I'm showing you the things that we saw. And if you have questions, because you might be moving to Singapore, please always feel free to put them down below. I will be answering them, and to the best of my knowledge. Oh, and by the way, I had a wonderful recommendation, because I know while I was there and getting my ear attuned to the dialect is going to be a challenge for me. They are incredibly patient, lovely people, but out of respect, I need to do some self-teaching, learning, and one of those is a dialect called Singlish, and it was recommended that I watch as much of the Singapore YouTube channels as possible. So if you're from Singapore and you think there's a channel that maybe I will be interested in listening to, and just to let you know, I mean, it can be anything from living here, things to go do, the interesting things about Singapore, to even stationary type discussions or journaling and things like that. I'd love to start listening, because that will help me train my ears so that I can better communicate and be more respectful of not having to ask people to constantly repeat themselves or having to change how they speak, so that they can simplify it for me to understand. So great recommendation. I really appreciate that. And I hope if anybody in Singapore is watching, you can let me know about those channels. That would be fantastic. If you're just a big Singapore puff, oh my goodness, a Singapore buff, sorry, and you've been watching for years, those recommendations would be fantastic too. So hope you enjoyed this little trip on our little look-see with some great visuals. Probably the next thing that we're going to be talking about is, once we got back, we have a lot to do in a very short time, and all of it's around packing, decluttering, getting rid of stuff, I mean all of that, and then hopefully finally getting over to Singapore. So I would think that's probably the next 2 or 3 videos we're going to be doing. So thanks for joining me, and again, if you want to put any comments, please put them below. And until next time, come check out what we expats are doing beyond the nest.